Hello, everyone. It is Wednesday, September 4th. We are in week two of the Ohio State regular season. This is the Lettermen Lounge, Lettermen Row's recruiting podcast. I am Matt Parker. Joining me always is Mick Walker. Uh, Mick, how was your weekend, man?
It's pretty good. We're busy with three games. We had the game on Saturday up there in Washington St. Joe's, fall to St. Edwards, but it was still good to see a couple Ohio State commits. I was excited to be able to get there, talk to them. Isaiah and Max are both great guys. We already have the Isaiah story up. We'll have more on Max here, hopefully today or Wednesday as we're recording this. Whenever this podcast comes out, I'm not entirely sure, but I'll have more on that. I'll have St. Joe's Preps coach talking about both of them. So I'm excited to get some more content out from that game.
Yeah, and it was also, if I'm not mistaken, the debut of Jet Harrison,
Yeah,
Marvin Harrison Jr.'s younger brother.
Yeah, he had a good game. Senior was on the sideline. I think Jed had 3 or 4 catches for about 50 or 60 yards. Nothing, no, Marvin Harrison Jr. like ginormous game that he had at Ohio State multiple times, but it was still a really solid performance for a freshman against a good defense in St. Edward. So it was a good performance to start his high school career. And I mean, he looks exactly like Marvin Harrison Jr. when he's out there, like facial expression, movement, everything looks almost identical. So as I wrote in the observations piece, it'll be fun to kind of just see how he projects and how he continues to grow throughout the rest of his high school career.
If he already had, one pair of shoes that were tough to follow in his dad, now he has two pairs of shoes to follow with his older brother, and that's a tall task.
Well, if you want to talk about his shoes specifically, he's wearing the New Balances, the Marvin Harrison Jr. getting the
There you
deal
go.
in already. Both him and Senior were wearing it. So, speaking specifically of shoes, Marvin Harrison Jr. is already taking care of the family when it comes to getting the New Balance deal represented.
I'm here to say that New Balance is not just for old guys. I wore a pair of New Balances to the Woody on Tuesday, and New Balances are not just for cutting your grass. I just want to go out there and say that. But anyway, um, yeah, Mick, you said that you were at three games last week. You briefly touched upon the St. Joe's St. Ed's game that was on Saturday that took place at just around the same time as Ohio State Akron, which Ohio State won 52-6. In case you somehow missed that, plenty of recruits were in the shoe as well. We have a lot of stories on that on the Lettermen Row website. There's some Elbert Hill stuff coming out today from me that will be out there. Vic Singleton, a 2026 cornerback from Toledo Central Catholic. We should have some stuff out about him later today as well. And speaking of Vic Singleton, that was his game last Friday, Toledo Central Catholic hosting Whitmer. Just about the biggest game that I want to say happens in Toledo every single year. Mick Walker and I, we were at that game on Friday, and we were both we were watching. We were watching the same guys to an extent, but I was more focused on 2025 offensive tackle commit Carter Lowe, while Mick was more so watching Vic Singleton, the 2026 corner that does have an Ohio State offer. And then just the next day he made the trip to Columbus. But Mick, I'm going to kick it to you first to talk about Vic and just a couple of things that were really impressive to you while you were watching him on Friday, and then a little bit about his recruitment right now.
Yeah, throughout every time you and I have talked about Vic Singleton, I've always said Jermaine Matthews, and I think after seeing him in person, that kind of lines up with how he is. They have a similar type of mentality, tenacity when they play, a feistiness. But also, I thought Vic, the biggest thing that you mentioned coming into the game was, hey, how's Vic going to tackle? And it seemed like Whitmer had the same question. They threw a couple. The first play of Whitmer's offense, I believe, was a screen right towards Vic's side, seeing if he was going to come up and tackle. I think he helped make that tackle, and then there was 2 other occasions where he made a one-on-one tackle in space, which was really promising to see because, Vic's a guy that's probably only 160 pounds, 150 something pounds. So to see him do that a couple of times, he was once again good in coverage. He's a guy that does a good job also when it comes to just return game and helping different ways for Central Catholic. Overall, I thought he had a good performance, and I think you also thought Carter had a good performance from what you saw.
Yeah, I wanted to touch upon though real quick. There was one play I want to say was in maybe the second quarter, when Central Catholic was on defense and Whitmer's running back took a toss to the field side, which at that point would have been the left side of the field, because that ball was on the right hash, and it was as much of a one-on-one pursuit angle drill that like you see during two-a-days and stuff like that, and Vic Singleton just came up in space, made the play against a bigger running back and stuff like that, and I was impressed. Like I was really impressed to see how physical that he was. Um, there's always like anytime we go see a commit or a target, very more often than not, it's we always kind of jokingly ask the question of, oh, who's the one that's committed to Ohio State? And then like 2 seconds later, it's oh, yep, there he is. And that very much was the case for Carter on Friday. I was really impressed with how much he's already changed his body from when we saw him in June at camp, to now. He's leaned out a little bit, and I think he really looks the part of being one of those athletic tackles that Ohio State really loves to have. Um, I mean, he played against some good high school talent on Friday. That Central Catholic defense is real nasty. Um, but yeah, I mean, I didn't write an observations piece because I don't know how many times I could say that Carter Lowe has good to great footwork for a senior offensive tackle that's committed to Ohio State. The first play of the game for Whitmer, he absolutely had a pancake block that was just very impressive. So he definitely looks the part of someone that's going to play offensive line at Ohio State. Whether or not, I mean, he was playing left tackle for Whitmer, as is the case for most offensive linemen in high school. Um, I think once he gets to Ohio State, I think he kicks over to the right side. Maybe could even move inside as a guard if they really needed him to. But just seeing him on Friday, I definitely feel more more comfortable saying that that tackle is the right projection for him at the next level. Um, but yeah, I mean, I was really impressed with Carter. I saw him last year. Funny enough, you and I were both at that Whitmer Finley game last year before we were colleagues and coworkers and stuff like that. And I think you and I could both agree that that was a bad day for the Whitmer offense. At times, the entire 11 for that Whitmer offense looked uninterested and playing ball. But that was not the case this past Friday against Toledo Central Catholic. I was really impressed with Carter, and I look forward to the progression throughout his senior season, and then once he gets to Ohio State in January. So that'll be some good stuff. But let's roll on to some recent happenings on the recruiting trail for against Ohio State, depending on how you want to look at it. All weekend long, it was pretty much putting out fires on the Lettermen Lounge message board, about 5-star plus cornerback commit Na'eem Offord, who is the number 9 overall prospect, number 3 cornerback in the On3 industry rankings. He continues to heavily flirt with nearby Auburn, and he took an official visit there. He was there for their Big Cat weekend visit at the end of July, and then he shows up for Auburn's season opener against Alabama A&M, where the Tigers absolutely beat the brakes off Alabama A&M. I think it was like 70-3 or something like that, which is what you would expect from an SEC team to do to a non-SEC team that is. I don't even think Alabama A&M is an FBS school, to be quite frank with you. But a lot of, I mean, I think the biggest thing was, and everyone saw it, but if not, Tom Loy of 247 put in the crystal ball that Na'eem Offord he is expecting him to flip to Auburn. I thought the wording of it was very interesting because he said, eventually flip, and basically we'll see if it happens. Kind of just felt like a true projection, kind of felt like how predictions are supposed to be. I spent a lot of the weekend actually most of the Lettermen Row staff, truthfully, spent most of the weekend really trying to get the lay of the land on the Na'eem Offord situation. And there had been talk about Auburn and Oregon throughout pretty much since he committed in to Ohio State in February. And he took official visits to both places and stuff like that. And the Ohio State staff, was not too worried about it all throughout the summer. They were like, you know what, like, we feel good, we feel good. And that same feeling is no longer there in Columbus. Speaking with just a few people throughout the weekend, um, it's really a matter of if and or when Offord decides to leave the Ohio State class, which I'm not saying that is happening. I'm just saying if and or when that happens. Uh, Ohio State already has its plans ready to go. Ohio State already knows where it is going to go. They've been rightfully so. They've been pretty tight-lipped about those plans, but it was relayed to me on Saturday and Sunday and even through Monday that Ohio State has a plan in place if it needs to act on it. That was relayed to Spencer Holbrook, who does a wonderful job covering the team for us at Lettermen Row. But Spencer's always interested in recruiting, so he likes to get a few recruiting questions in there. Alex Lightman just came out with a insider Wednesday morning about the Offord situation, which a lot of it, just confirms and echoes some of the things that I had reported on Monday in Buckeye Bits. And I just think this is a very interesting situation, but I want to get your take on it. Like I want to get what you're thinking.
Yeah, I got to speak with Naeem down in May at Nashville for the On3 Elite Series. Then he seemed locked in throughout the times we saw the Ohio State coaching staff in June, or just spoke to sources throughout June. It seemed like there was always a level of confidence about Na'eem Offord. Obviously, I think as things have gone on, Auburn's obviously cranked up the recruiting classes on a few different levels, flipping Nathaniel Marshall from Michigan, looking like they're going to flip Deuce Knight from Notre Dame, and then obviously Na'eem Offord being the other big in-state guy that they're trying to flip from Ohio State. So losing him would be obviously losing a 5-star plus cornerback is a big loss, but you have reiterated this, and I think you've talked about it more recently with Albert Hill in the 2026 class, but Tim Walton always has his guy, and Devin Sanchez is that guy in 25. So anything else after that would just be, you don't want to say a luxury, but it is definitely helpful that you have Devin Sanchez to lay back on at the end of the day. And I think there's some guys that they're started to circle back on or look at that you've started here. And I think from what we've talked, you like those names. I think you have some confidence in those type of prospects, and we'll have more when that time comes to be able to share that stuff. But I think there is a very clear plan in place to go forward afterwards to pair somebody or pair somebody's, multiple people potentially, with Devin Sanchez when that time comes. So overall, I think it'd be a big loss, and I think he's a talented player. Obviously, you don't want to concede anything yet because things could change. Obviously, if he visits at some point this season and things change, then that's a big sway for Ohio State. But having Devin Sanchez, having a clear list of names to go after, gives you a certain level of confidence, and it should give Ohio State fans a certain level of confidence when it comes to cornerback recruiting.
Yeah, and I'm glad you brought up the Devin Sanchez notion because, talking with people at Ohio State during recruiting camp season in June, I mean, I wish people could hear how, people at Ohio State talk about Devin Sanchez because, you people at Ohio State right now can't on the record talk about Devin Sanchez because he is still a high schooler, and until he signs his letter of intent and is enrolled at Ohio State, or pretty much until he signs his letter of intent, actually, is when Ohio State can, say, yeah, Devin Sanchez is going to be the next one. But there is a lot of high praise for Devin Sanchez, who he's a big corner, man. He's like 6'2", 180 pounds. Like, he's a big dude. And there's a lot of expectation already from this Ohio State staff that when he gets to Columbus in January as a mid-year enrollee, that he's going to be pushing guys for time already as a true freshman. And I think now that's not nearly as rare as it used to be, just because of how much football these kids play. 7-on-7 is a very big thing for, these skill guys, these defensive backs. So they have so many reps under their belt by the time that they get to their respective college. So there's a lot of expectation already on Devin Sanchez, who I watched the tape from his season opener. He looks the part of being the number one cornerback in the country by a few different places. And then as it relates to Offord, I had just watched the Wiltfong whip around with Josh Newberg and Steve Wiltfong. Be sure to give that a watch on the On3 channel on YouTube. They've got some great stuff over there. They're always talking about Ohio State. Whether Ohio State fans like the conversation or not, that's kind of in the eye of the beholder there. But they were talking about the Na'eem Offord situation, and it's still sounding like it's really depending on what time the game will be. But it does sound like if the opportunity presents itself based on the kickoff time, that Iowa game will be when Na'eem Offord and his family return to Columbus, which I think is great because if that ends up being a 3:30 or a primetime game for the Buckeyes, that's back-to-back weeks that Na'eem Offord gets to see Ohio State because he's going to the Oregon-Ohio State game in Eugene. And so if that kickoff time for Iowa works out pretty nicely for the Buckeyes, that works out nicely from a recruiting standpoint as well, because you're likely to get Na'eem Offord on campus. Devin Sanchez is going to be at the Iowa game, I'm pretty sure, regardless of time. So if you can get those two paired up at a game in the Horseshoe, especially with with how strong the entire Sanchez family recruits. It's not just Devin; it's his mom and his dad, who are wonderful people, and I've loved the interactions I've had with them. And so you just get all of that, and like that matters. I think if Iowa, doesn't Iowa in the next, what is that, 4 weeks, 5 weeks, something like that, there's a good chance the Hawkeyes could be undefeated heading to Columbus. That would be a good game. Should be a good defensive showcase for Ohio State against the Iowa offense, if you will. I know they just put up some points this past weekend, but they played Illinois State or something like that. So who does not exactly have the Ohio State defense, but
hey, no need to disrespect the Redbirds here. That's just uncalled for.
I mean, you're right. But I think for the sake of conversation, the Redbirds defense is not nearly the same as the Buckeyes defense.
The other big thing about when you look at the Iowa game is it could be potential for a guy like Aaron Scott to get even more snaps. And the big thing that Auburn can't pitch right now is Cam Coleman had a touchdown in their first game, a true freshman wide receiver from Alabama that everybody likes. And Amaris Williams, who Ohio State was recruiting for a while, that signed with Auburn. They were playing a lot of true freshmen, a lot of true sophomores of this Hugh Freeze era. So if you're able to get some more of these young corners like Jermaine Matthews was last season, like Aaron Scott could be this season, pitch Na'eem Offord on that, being able to play early with Devin Sanchez, that'd be a good thing to do it at Iowa as well.
Yeah, because I think you look at that 23 class that Ohio State brought in with Jermaine Matthews and Calvin Simpson-Hunt, and those were the only two that they brought in. And then you look at the three that they brought in 24 with Aaron Scott Jr., Bryce West, Miles Lockhart. Aaron is really the only one of those guys that's like that big outside corner that Ohio State, really likes right now on that outside corner. And then in this 25 class right now, you have Devin Sanchez and Na'eem Offord, who are both big cornerbacks. And I think there's just an opportunity there for both of them to get some early playing time at Ohio State if they both end up at Ohio State, which I'm certainly expecting Devin Sanchez to end up at Ohio State. We'll see about Na'eem Offord and stuff like that. But that's any closing thoughts on the Offord situation as we roll down the itinerary, if you will?
I don't think so. I think that buttoned it up pretty well. Might be able to segue it into obviously this past weekend you were inside the shoe. You got to see the recruits coming down, all the different visitors. You've caught up with a pair of talented wide receivers that were on campus, but they also had three in-state cornerbacks, all of which that have offers on campus. So what was some takeaways? I know you wrote about it in the Buckeye bits, which people should go check out. Subscribe to Lettermen Row to read that. But what were some of your takeaways, some thoughts on the guys that you saw on the shoe, conversations you've had with sources or the players themselves after on some of those guys that visited? Because it was a good in-state crop overall.
Yeah, well, to just totally 180 from that, I'm going to talk about something that I didn't even put in there, which was five-star linebacker Riley Pettijohn, Ohio State commit, visited. It worked out because he had his season debut on Thursday, so it just kind of worked out to make it to Ohio State. That guy's going to take someone's job next year. I mean, he walked out of the South Tunnel, and I forget who I said this to, and I was just like, yeah, that kid's going to take someone's job next year at Ohio State. There's a lot of confidence in his abilities from the Buckeyes, and this linebacker class that they have is ridiculous, man. I mean, if they can hang on to all three of them, and Riley Pettijohn, T.J. Alford, and Eli Lee, that's one of the best linebacker classes in the country. So kudos to James Laurinaitis for being himself and getting these guys to Ohio State, at least verbally committed to Ohio State. But circling back onto what you had asked about these in-state guys, I'm just always impressed when I see Elbert Hill because every time I see him, he just looks more and more just developed, you know. Um, I remember last year, he visited for a couple of games last year and he still had a little bit of that baby face, kind of trying to that's the funny thing about these high school prospects, right? That we talk about is that some of them like are really, really good at football and they look like they just started high school, So it's like this kid plays like he's like 16, 17 years old, but he looks like he's 13, right? Like in the face, and that just kind of cracks me up. But Albert Hill, like, really, really is starting to look the part of a guy that I think is going to be ultimately end up in that nickel spot for Ohio State. I mean, he's a good boundary corner, a good outside corner, and stuff like that. But I think when you look at the long term projection, I think that's a guy that has more positional versatility to him and could play both, which is not unlike something that Ohio State has done. I mean, Jermaine Matthews took a lot of nickel reps throughout preseason training camp. I would expect to see him play that nickel position at times during the season, just so he can get some experience at it. But I'm just really impressed with how physically mature Albert Hill continues to get every time we see him. I exchanged some texts with him over the last couple of days, and one of the questions I had asked him was, I was just like, like you showed up for the Ohio State Akron game. Are you planning on? Actually, it was, how many more games do you plan on coming to? And his response cracked me up. It was something to the extent of, I don't know, I just kind of pop up at games. So I think I think we're at the point in Albert Hill's recruitment where we could just put him as a potential visitor every single week because he has that relationship with Tim Walton. He has that relationship with Jim Knowles, with Ryan Day, with Mark Pantoni, with so many people on that Ohio State staff. And I would not expect a decision anytime soon, but it's going to be really, really hard for anyone to top Ohio State right now in that recruitment.
Yeah, so he's a guy that I showed you the picture here. I actually met Albert, I believe before he even started high school, before when he was in 8th grade. So I've known him for a while, but he's always kind of been this guy playing early at Hoban. He's always been Albert Hill, Rock Hill. That's what the people call him. And he's always kind of been regarded as this next guy. And he's continued to live up to it every single time. So it's been awesome to see him grow. But you and I have always, when it comes to his recruitment, I've kind of always thought this winter, this offseason, maybe even the All-American Bowl, similar to how Devin Sanchez did it last year, because Albert Hill's a guy that plays with South Florida Express, plays for them on some Adidas affiliated 7-on-7 teams. So maybe that's a timeline, but I have no clue specifically. That's just more in your and I speculation on what he could do. I do think Ohio State is setting the tone very much for this recruitment. And I'm excited to see kind of what he says when we go see him again in 2 weeks here for the St. Ignatius game. The other guy that I was interested to see, and I think I'm going to catch up with him later today to get more color on the visit, was Vic Singleton, who we saw. We didn't get to catch up with him. There were some complications at the end of the Whitmer Central Catholic game that we had to head out a little bit early, but we were excited to see him. I'm excited. I liked what I saw of him. I'm excited to talk to him here soon and just kind of see how things are with him and Tim Walton, because he's the one guy. Elbert Hill visited in July. Jacob Witherspoon, the other guy that is Ohio State is recruiting as a cornerback in the end state, he visited the end of July. Vic Singleton did not. So I just want to get some more thoughts on where he's looking at. I think Vic, of the three, probably has the most eye towards the out-of-state schools, just kind of being from Toledo, maybe wanting to get out of the state. So to hear from him, to hear about Tim Walton, that's what I'm excited to see. But it was good to see him pop up. He texted that to us right after the game to kind of say that. And then Jacob Witherspoon was the same way. He's a guy that we'll see much later in the season. I think he's the last week of the season. You could see him before, because I know we're going to split up in some different games. But he's a guy I think both Tim Walton and Matt Carreri like. So it was good. I imagine they were both happy to see him down there on Saturday.
Yeah, Jacob Witherspoon. I think you're definitely much more on top of that recruitment than I am, but I think from a bigger picture, what is really fascinating to me is that if he wanted to, Tim Walton does not have to leave Ohio to get his 2026 class. I would expect 3 cornerbacks in that class, maybe even 4, depending on what happens in 25. Um, but that 2026 class, Ohio State doesn't have to leave its backyard to get guys, um, which I think is obviously a very good thing. If you can, I mean, Ryan Day has said this multiple times. If he could have a roster 1 through 85 of guys from Ohio, he would. But you gotta go compete for national championships, and that would not lend itself the opportunity, at least in Ohio State's mind, to do that with 1 through 85 being from Ohio. But this 26 class in Ohio, man, is ridiculous. I mean, it is just up and down the board. It is very, very good across multiple positions. And I think moving forward, I would expect a change in recruiting philosophy from the Buckeyes, especially now that 85 is going to 105. I would not be shocked if you saw Ohio State take at least one in-state kid at every single position, maybe barring quarterback, just depending on on what happens there. But I would kind of expect moving forward that every single Ohio State position coach would take at least one in-state guy every year moving forward. Um, but I had a couple of things that I wrote down that I wanted to talk about, but we are already approaching the 30-minute mark, and I don't want to, make these, 45, 50 minutes. We want to try and keep these high and tight. Um, so I'm just gonna go right into um, the games that we're seeing this week, and then we'll end the show talking about Ohio State's Week 2 matchup, which is a primetime banger, Nick, against Mid American Conference uh, opponent, Western Michigan Broncos. So let's talk about the games that we're heading to this week. I think, is it just a one game week for you this week, or you still
Yeah.
gonna visit 9,000 high schools this week?
No, we're locked in for one game. Probably because of just the late week. I posted about it, but obviously Labor Day on Monday. My wife and I's anniversary was on Tuesday, so we're trying to spend some time with her. Probably not going to get in any practice. It's just a one game. You and I are lined up to be at Massillon. We're still finalizing some stuff with the coaching staff and the athletics staff over at Massillon to be sure we're locked in. But we should have a final decision on that today to know that we're headed up there to go see Massillon, which is one of the reigning Division II state champ in Ohio, take on Bergen Catholic, which has Ohio State wide receiver commit Quincy Porter and 2026 safety target Jordan Thomas, and then Jermaine Kinsler's a defensive lineman 2026 class that camped and earned an offer this summer. So I'm excited to see them. I know this is a game that you've had circled for pretty much the whole summer.
Yeah, I am. I am like you. I'm a big fan of high school football, especially Ohio high school football. Growing up in Ohio, playing high school ball and stuff like that. So for I feel like for any Ohioan, seeing the Massillon Tigers play in Paul Brown Stadium, I believe that's their stadium name. Seeing them play in Massillon under the lights on Friday, that's just like a bucket list item. So I'm very excited for that. And what makes it better is that they're playing, arguably one of the best teams in the country in Bergen Catholic that has, as you mentioned, Ohio State commit Quincy Porter in the 2025 class, the borderline 5-star wide receiver for Brian Hartline and Devin Jordan, and then two talented 2026 guys. Particularly, I'm really excited to see Jordan Thomas do his thing. I think we talk so much about positional versatility with these defensive backs that Ohio State recruits, and I think he, of any guy that they're recruiting in that 2026 cycle, has the most positional versatility. He could play safety, he could play corner, he could play nickel. I mean, he could do a lot of different things if he decided to go to Ohio State. I know he's rocking with Ohio State right now. He has a lot of interest in a lot of Big Ten programs, quite honestly. I mean, I know he's interested in Ohio State. He's interested in Michigan. Penn State is a school that's been mentioned in there. I'm sure there's some Southern interest, but very rarely do you see those. I guess not very rarely, but you're more often to see those Jersey guys still stay up north than to see them go south or anywhere else. Um, Unless you're Davison Igbinosun, in which case you go to Ole Miss for a couple years and then you go to Ohio State. So, but I think for me, one of the things I'm really looking forward to is how that Massillon defense can hold up against Quincy Porter. Uh, I mean, Massillon's one of the most sound football programs in the state. They won the Division II state title last year in a 7-2 final. Against a very talented Akron Archbishop Hoban, who is talented once again. And that 7-2 final really just goes to show how great both of those programs are. And I'm just really looking forward to seeing. I mean, Quincy Porter is ridiculous. He's 6'4", he's over 200 pounds, and he can move. Like, he can move. So I'm very intrigued to see how Nate Moore's Massillon Tigers are going to play defense against a guy that's like that. Massillon plays a pretty good schedule this year, but I don't know if they're going to play someone that is as talented and as physically mature as someone like Quincy Porter. So for me, that's the biggest thing that I'm looking forward to seeing on Friday. Hopefully the weather holds off. I checked the forecast earlier this morning, and there's a high chance for some thunderstorms, but that was in Columbus. Massillon is a good hour and change away, so it could be different. I don't know. We'll see. But what is something from that game you're looking forward to?
Yeah, we talked about it a little bit on the sidelines last week while we were waiting for the kickoff for Central Catholic and Whitmer. But Massillon has one guy I know of, at least in Lennox Lemon, that has a Division I offer as a wide receiver. It has a handful of MAC offers, actually. But overall, Massillon's a very fast team. When I was up there in the spring, and they had multiple guys go in the 4.6, 4.7-ish range of the 40, which is fast for a hand time at a high school showcase. So they have a very fast wide receiver core, very fast offense. And that's something I'm excited to see for against Jordan Thomas. Line up at whether it's a corner or safety and just see how he handles some legitimate speed, see how he handles actual talented wide receivers in front of him. And I mean, they're going to see that almost every week with the schedule that Bergen Catholic plays, but it'll be fun to see it against some of the top guys in Ohio just because I didn't get to see him this summer. I know we both got to see him. He was there on the 17th. I mixed up my days on Jordan Thomas, but I'm just excited to see him in action against some guys with the pads on. And I'm excited to hopefully talk to him after the game because I know we have him down on the visitors list. I think EJ Holland of our Michigan site might have reported that he could head up to Michigan for the Texas game this week as well. So there's obviously going to be some tussling with him in the Midwest and those two programs that are trying to recruit him. So excited to hopefully talk to him and get some better answers on that and just get an update on his recruitment.
Yeah, I mean, and that goes back to what we had said about the Big Ten interest. You have, Ohio State, who is one of the biggest brands in college football. And then you have Michigan, who is the reigning national champs. They're the reigning Big Ten champs. So historically always boasts pretty good defenses. So there's a lot of competition in the Midwest for an East Coast guy. I'm sure if you're Rutgers and you're just like, man, this stinks. That's no shade to Greg Schiano's program, but I'm just, there's some bigger dogs out here. So speaking of Western Michigan, let's talk about a couple of guys that we are expecting for that game. The one name that we have on our board right now that to me, who I was surprised did not visit Ohio State last weekend just because it was Akron. This guy is from Akron. So you're kind of just, well, you wanted the lazy shoe in, I'll be honest with you. But that's 2026 offensive tackle Sam Greer, who, out of Akron Archbishop Hoban, he is on our board right now as someone that's going. We're expecting there on Saturday. That's someone that is a little bit surprising to me that he's not going to Michigan, just because Michigan is one of those schools that's talked about in his recruitment. But you keep pounding the table that you think he's going to end up at Ohio State.
Yeah, I think, and I'll pound the table rankings wise as well. In my personal opinion, I think he's probably the only person that could challenge Albert Hill for the top spot in Ohio. Sam's 6'8", he's sub 300 pounds, hovering right around 300 pounds, and he's a college left tackle. We talked about Carter Lowe being potential. I think Sam Greer is a college left tackle. We're going to see him in a couple weeks. I don't know if you've gotten to see him with pads on. I know last season he missed a lot of the season with injury. So I don't know if you've gotten to see him. I'm excited for you to be able to see him with pads on. And I think that's the other thing is Justin Fry has been consistent in recruiting Sam Greer ever since he arrived at Ohio State, ever since they offered him through the injury. Now, I think Ohio State, Michigan, and every program that's recruiting Sam wants a full season of healthy film as a junior. That'd be a big win for Sam to be able to have that, because I think it could take his recruitment, his ranking, everything up a notch. But he's a guy that I would love. I think he has a good personality to play offensive lineman. He's a nasty dude. And so it'll be good to have him back on campus. Like you said, Michigan's a school that's recruiting him hard, but I think there's a relationship with Justin Fry that's a little bit more unique than what he would have with Sherrone Moore or Grant Newsome. And then obviously Ryan Day is very involved with just all in-state offensive prospects. So that those two, plus being able to get him on campus, you have Albert Hill, who's in his ear. You have Eli Lee, who's going to be in his ear. It could be a big weekend for Ohio State on that front.
Yeah, and then additionally, I was talking with Jake Cook, 2025 offensive line commit, who pretty much, he told me on Sunday or Monday, I forget what day it was, that he's pretty much just going to be at every single Ohio State game, which you would expect because he's, from Westerville. So that's about 15 minutes northeast, depending on where you're at in the city. But
did the Nears come up? Did Nears come up at all?
No, that conversation has not yet happened. I've been saving that one for him. So.
For those of you that don't know, Matt is an Olentangy Orange grad, and Olentangy Orange took down Westerville North in a big shootout last week in Central Ohio to move to 2-0, led by 2026 quarterback Levi Davis. And Matt has been waiting to mention it to Jake Cook when the next opportunity arises.
Yes. And Jake, if you're somehow watching this show, first off, thanks, man. We appreciate it. Secondly, that's tough. That is tough. But yes, I was funny enough, I kept checking the score of that game while Mick and I were in Toledo last week, and it was quite a race of emotions when Olentangy Orange had I think like 2 or 3 touchdown lead, and then they were down, and then there's just it was all over the place. But I think if you have Jake Cook there this weekend, with again expecting Eli Lee to be there, expecting Tavian St. Clair to be there, maybe Carter Lowe shows up again. So you have that presence of in-state guys that are committed to Ohio State, and a guy like Sam Greer shows up. That's big time for Ohio State, and maybe that's a recruitment that I'm not saying that it will. I'm literally just kind of tossing this out here into the ether, but maybe that's a recruitment that ends before the year 2024 ends. We've seen that with Justin Fry. He got Ian Moore in the class in, I think it was October of 2023. Or actually maybe it was even October of 2022. It was October of 2022, I believe. Yeah. So, got that done early. Got Carter Lowe in January of this year, at least publicly. I'm sure Carter had been at least a silent to Ohio State a few weeks before he ever actually announced his commitment, because I don't really know where he would have gone. Actually, he said he would have gone to Georgia if it wasn't Ohio State. So, but there's just a great opportunity for such a strong in-state presence for Sam Greer, keeping it in-state with offensive linemen. 2027 offensive tackle Reed Gherkin, who that was a name that was new on my radar the other day. And I started watching him, and he's the real deal, Mick. Like he's the real deal. He's good. He's a good ball player.
Yeah, he doesn't have the size of a Sam. He's more in line with the Max Riley, but I think he's a little bit bigger than Max, a little bit more filled out, has a little bit more of a more body mass on him already. I think Reed's probably the best 2027 offensive lineman in the state. Already has a handful of MAC offers. I'd have to double check. I believe he either visited Tennessee last weekend or visited Tennessee at the end of July. One of those two. So he's a guy that's already receiving Power 5 interest. You can double check me because I don't know the schedule, but there's a bye week coming up after this Western Michigan game, correct? So that's the time where you could see whether it's a Reed Gherkin who's going to have 3 games of film under his belt, or a Adam Guthrie who's going to have 3 games of film under his belt, Braden Fogel at Lexington who's going to have 3 games of film. Those guys you could see Ohio State go in school or go to their game on Friday night and kind of get an in-person evaluation during that bye week to kind of get more information and potentially issue some offers, because I imagine we will see some kind of go out. And I think Reed Gherkin's a guy that, whether it's this fall or next summer at camp, because he had a good performance at camp last summer, but he's still young. He's a guy that I think Ohio State fans should kind of keep on the radar as that next top in-state offensive lineman in the 2027 class.
And you mentioned coaches going out on the road. They've been able to do that since September 1st, which was Sunday. And with it, this is a pretty unique situation for Ohio State because they have a primetime game against a level program of Western Michigan. I would not be too shocked if you saw Ohio State coaches out on the road Friday night, maybe 1 or 2 coaches trying to keep it somewhere in state. No one's going to be going out of state. Kind of helps that, there's an out of state commit that's going to be in the state this week. That's an opportunity for Brian Hartline to maybe check out Quincy Porter. Obviously, I mean, the bye week lends itself to doing that, but that's a unique opportunity for Ohio State to get out on the road, maybe just a little bit, if they feel the need to do that, even though they have a game the next day. I know they're kind of weird about that, but maybe not weird, but they're focused on the task at hand, which is the Western Michigan Broncos, formerly Row the Boat, but that's now in Minnesota. So, Mick, we are approaching 45 minutes here. I wanted to try and keep it high and tight. But do you have any final thoughts on anything that we had talked about, anything that we did not talk about, anything that you're looking forward to for this coming weekend?
No, I'm just excited for the football game. Thank you guys to anybody that signed up that during the kickoff sale. It was a big success for Lettermen Row. Thank you guys for being here. And if you're not subscribed, if you see Matt or I at a football game, be sure to say hello. We are working on it. I believe here soon we will have some different cards or some discount things that we can give you to maybe entice you to sign up during that event. So if you see us, be sure to say hello. Tell us whether you're a subscriber. Tell us what you like about it, and we can hopefully get you signed up as well. Happy to have everybody. So we're excited for a good football season. I know the early slate here is not great, but Spencer's got some great things planned for not only this week, but the rest of the season when it comes to coverage. And we're excited for high school football, college football, and everything to get rolling.
Yeah, I couldn't have said it any better myself. I will tack on there. If you're watching this on YouTube, be sure to give us a like and subscribe to the Lettermen Row YouTube channel. It's not just Mick and I yapping about recruiting on here. Spencer is the king yapper, if you will, talking a lot of Ohio State football with Andy Backstrom and Tim May, the 41-year vet. They do a great job of covering everything on the Ohio State football team. So be sure to give the channel, give the video a like, give the channel a subscribe, check out all the other content that we have on here. And I think that's going to do it here in the Lettermen Lounge. For Mick Walker, I am Matt Parker. Thanks for watching, and we'll see you soon.